before I get into this. This is a big TikToker. And so someone sent me this Saturday morning, and I couldn't go through it and reply the way that I wanted to, because I had a busy weekend. And so I'm glad I can go through this with you guys. But this is going to totally demonstrate why diversity, equity, inclusion philosophy training is just garbage, because she's a history teacher and she's studied all this stuff, and she's going to demonstrate why it's garbage, and I will walk through it with you together. So let's go.
Hey, TikTok history teacher here. I want to talk for a second about conversations I'm hearing over Joe Biden's promise to nominate a black woman to the Supreme Court. And I might get myself in trouble, but I think it's really important that we talk about this. And by we, I want to be really clear. I mean mostly white people, because white people are the only people that I hear complaining or feeling uncomfortable about this.
Okay, so I just want to say that's not true. I'm sure there's a lot more white people talking about this, but there are people speaking out against this other than white people. And I've heard black conservatives talk about it. I've heard, Ted Cruz talk about it, and some other people. So it's not just white people talking about it, but just because you're white doesn't mean your opinion's not valid. Let's go on.
At all. Like, we seem to have this idea that explicitly mentioning someone's race or saying, like, I think we should have a insert race here person on the Supreme Court is implicitly racist. It's not, and let me tell you why. And first off, I'm not a black woman, and so I'm gonna, put in the comments a lot of creators that you should go follow who are probably gonna have way more powerful and important and useful commentary on this topic. I will say, though, that I think I'm uniquely positioned because I am a white teacher, a white educator who has over a decade of experience talking to mostly, let's be honest, other white kids about race and about identity and about these sort of topics.
So she's got a long experience talking about this stuff, and that's going to include hours and hours of this diversity, equity, inclusion training. So you see she's very biased in her beliefs, and she's teaching a lot of kids out there, and I guess particularly a lot of white kids. So FYI, these are the kind of people who are indoctrinating your children, and you might be like, she hasn't said anything crazy yet. Let's just wait, guys.
I also am one of our school's co-coordinators for diversity, equity, inclusion, along with a woman of color, and we've gone through like an 80-hour, national training to be able to talk to people about issues of race and identity. Anyway, all that being said, let's talk about why reverse racism isn't real.
It's just racism. And I'm sorry, you can't just be excluded from being racist because you're black and you don't have the institutional power. That's what they'll say. That's so convenient, by the way. It's just so utterly convenient that black people can't be racist. And I guess every other minority can't be racist. It's just exclusively the white people that can be racist. That's crazy. And reverse racism is a term, but really, she's correct. It's not really. It's just plain old, good old fashioned racism. Okay. Let's keep going.
So there's this kind of conversation going around about how explicitly saying I'm going to nominate a black person or a black woman to the Supreme Court is racist because it's excluding other races. Joe Biden is basically saying, I'm not even going to consider anyone who's not black.
And that is racist. It'd be different. It was like, we're doing a movie about Martin Luther King, and we are only going to consider black people. Okay. That's like a role that's like fitted for that. Okay. If you're talking about like who's going to be on the Supreme Court, that shouldn't be based on your race. I know that when people do fill in certain jobs, sometimes they think about having a more diverse crew or whatever, but not everybody will announce that. And I'm not even saying that's right at all, but this dude flat out announced it. But it's not only discriminatory against white people. Okay. What about all the other minorities that it discriminates against? What about Asians? What about Latinos? It's not just the white people getting the shaft here. That's what's crazy about it.
And here's why I don't think that's actually a problem, but it's definitely not reverse racism. One, because he's trying to right a historic wrong.
Let's go back in time and just think about, there's a black person on the Supreme Court right now, isn't there? Oh yeah, his name is Clarence Thomas. Oh yeah, Joe Biden treated him like trash. Oh yeah, they did the high-tech lynching against him.
And from my standpoint, as a black American, as far as I'm concerned, it is a high-tech lynching for uppity blacks who in any way deign to think for themselves, to do for themselves, to have different ideas. And it is a message that unless you kowtow to an old order, this is what will happen to you. You will be lynched, destroyed, caricatured by a committee of the U.S. Senate rather than hung from a tree.
Joe Biden is the one who committed the injustice against Clarence Thomas. Now, if you're saying that we need to kneecap every other race and be discriminatory against whites, Hispanics, and Asians in order to get this black woman on the Supreme Court, what we do have a black person on the Supreme Court, and liberals do not care about him. They talk about race, but they do not hold it in such high regard. If you do not fit the ideology that they want, then your race isn't as important. There's so many people who are so racist toward me every day because I am a black conservative. We have a black person on the Supreme Court. There's only 9 justices. It's a black person on the court, and there's 2 women on the court. If you think it's just impossible for a black woman to get on the Supreme Court, if you think that is impossible, that's a little crazy. And if you really need Joe Biden at this point in time, after we have a black VP, well, she's mixed with other stuff too, but we have Kamala Harris, person of color, who is the vice president of the United States, and you have Obama, who was the president before Donald Trump was. You've seen people like Condoleezza, Colin Powell, who I remember the Bush years. People like, Bush is so racist. And like, what do you mean? There's Colin Powell, there's Condoleezza. Like, he's still a racist. And they would disregard them all the time. But Colin Powell was cool when he said, he liked Obama. If you think that you really, 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 really need this black woman nominated to the Supreme Court because that will be able to be like, oh, I can make all my dreams come true because someone else did it first. There's a lot of other people you're not looking toward. So I can understand people feeling that he needs to solve this great injustice. But here's the problem with equality versus equity, because you're trying to rig the game, I suppose, and you're willing to be discriminatory against other races. And it's not just white people. What about Hispanics? What about Asians? All these other people who would be well qualified for the position. What about other men of color? What about black men? Maybe there's another black man who'll be well suited for this role. You're excluding all those people to be racist and sexist. And you're saying, well, you're trying to solve this problem. That's not progressive, in my opinion. That's regressive. So you're willing to chop everyone off the knees in order to build your Frankenstein monster of equity. That's not a good thing, in my opinion. Maybe you think it's a good thing to show discrimination to solve injustice. I don't think that's a good thing in 2022. But hey, she's a white history teacher who's had a lot of training, so maybe she knows better.
I mean, he's also trying to get black voters and stuff, but...
Whoa. Wait a minute. We just not about to speed past there. You should throw that out there. You just acknowledged that Joe Biden is doing it to emotionally manipulate black people. He is picking a black woman to emotionally manipulate voters. That's disgusting. You're like, oh, he's just doing, and you can say, well, a lot of people do things to get votes. That's true, but he has so little respect. He could have just done it. He could have just had his list of nominees that were all kind of diverse and picked the black woman, and people were like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is so historic. But no, he announced, I will only consider a black woman. Cheapened it, really. And you full well know it's to manipulate people. And some people are dumb enough and emotional enough to be like, yes, thank you, Joe Biden. That was enough to buy my vote. That was enough to buy my loyalty. That's crazy. That is nothing to take lightly. And you know what? People have had very destructive policies in the past and bought black votes before. It's not nothing new from the Democrat side, buying votes. And again, you can say, well, people do that all the time. And you can say, well, Trump tried to do the platinum plan and all the other stuff. Yeah, he did a bunch of good stuff. Joe Biden has been a notoriously bad politician. He's a very bad president right now. That's subjective, I suppose. I think it's pretty objective, but that's a subjective opinion. But even people who on TikTok and other places who are like, well, Biden's not great, but he's better than Trump. So you agree he's not great. At least we can agree on that. At least we can agree on that. That is not something to take lightly. And you know what? Joe Biden has been lying his whole entire a career for as far as he's run for president, about his participation in the civil rights movement.
I came out of the civil rights movement. I was one of those guys that sat in and marched and all that stuff.
That's not something he just lied about like way back when. That's something he lies about even recently. He recently made a remark about getting arrested or something, like the throwaway sort of line.
I did not walk in the shoes of generations of students who walked these grounds, but I walked other grounds because I'm so damn old I was there as well. They think I'm kidding, man. Seems like yesterday, the first time I got arrested. Anyway.
On the campaign trail, he was repeating stuff.
His aides went back to say, look, he was in office marching for the idea of civil rights, but was not actually marching in the streets. But that would not fly as much. That he was supporting civil rights. But I'm saying that in today's
that's not what the word marching means.
Before, when he was the vice president, he would lie to black voters in churches about participating in the civil rights movement. That's disgusting.
You know, when I was a teenager in Delaware, for real, I got involved in the civil rights movement.
That's super disgusting and offensive. This is a person who said, you're not black if you don't vote for me.
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
You can say, well, that was a joke. Why do you have the audacity to say such a thing? People talk about Joe Rogan right now. That is extraordinarily offensive. You are not black if you even commit the thought crime of not voting for me. If you even think about it, if you have trouble thinking about it, coming to the conclusion, me, Joe Biden, who did things that are controversial to a lot of the black community, like the 1994 crime bill, if you don't vote for me, then how are we going to save the soul of the nation? Me, the person who lies about participating in the civil rights movement, who committed the high-tech lynching of Clarence Thomas. But when you are picking someone who is black, how are you guys defining what's black? Because Nicole Hannah-Jones from the 1619 Project said there's a difference between being ethnically black and being politically black. You have Michael Eric Dyson, who talks about someone like Winsome Sears, who has an incredible story, who's an incredible woman, and will say,
they want white supremacy by ventriloquist effect. There is a black mouth moving, but a white idea through the running on the runway of the tongue of a figure who justifies and legitimates the white supremacist practices.
And he said that about a whole bunch of different other people. It's not even an original thought from him. So what kind of black is the real black to you people? And if it's not just purely just being black, then what does it matter? Is it just your idea of blackness? Because how can they celebrate this new person who's Joe Biden's going to pick while not liking Clarence Thomas? And I can understand, well, you don't like Clarence Thomas because you don't like his rulings, you don't like his pieces that he writes, you don't like his ideology, and I can respect that opinion. I can respect that. But if we're going to judge people based off of their opinions, then their race shouldn't matter.
He's also trying to right a historic wrong. He is taking a historically marginalized group and trying to affirm their existence in our country and make sure that they have representation in all the branches of government.
Oh, okay. The Supreme Court, what they're supposed to represent is a law. They're supposed to rule on, is this constitutional, is this not constitutional? I don't need your opinion on a court ruling as a black woman. I don't need your opinion on a court to give your court ruling as a Hispanic person. I don't need your court ruling as an Asian person. I don't need your court ruling as a man, as a woman. What does the law say, period? Is it constitutional? If you want to elect people who, because you think it's important that they represent you, guess what? You can elect that person to Congress because they're supposed to represent the people. Or you can even elect them to the Senate. The Senate is supposed to represent the state. But the Supreme Court, it's not supposed to be political like that. That's why you have their lifetime appointments and the president picks them, they appoint them. And then the Senate goes through the confirmation process. It is not supposed to be political. And I understand that it is extraordinarily political right now and has been for some time. Actually, there's a particular person who made it super political, who kind of shifted the dynamics of it. I think that person's name was Joe Biden. So saying, hey, we need to make sure that the courts look like America. Again, you have a black person on the Supreme Court and you have women on the Supreme Court. It's not weird that there's white people on the Supreme Court. America has a lot of white people still in it. And you can say, well, throughout the years, there's all these people who haven't been appointed. Yeah, I acknowledge that there's been some big changes in our nation. But again, being discriminatory isn't a way to solve racism. And Joe Biden announcing it is sure a trash move. Because he wants his kudos and he wants them before it, but he doesn't mind letting you know that he thinks you're a sucker and he's going to pander to you and he expects you to get in line. That's the thing that ticked my sister off. My sister who's right underneath me. She was so mad when he said the "you ain't black" comment because she said Joe Biden is saying, I own you Negroes. And I know it. That was so offensive. And you say he was joking. Joe Biden wasn't joking about nothing.
So reverse racism isn't real because racism, just like by its definition, truly like the academic definition, it's prejudice that's backed by institutional power.
Okay, so again, I hate this definition. It is how can you just twist this so much? And even in this sense, this particular sense right here, where you have the president of the United States discriminating against every other race and gender. I mean, there's only two, but besides the black woman, how is that not backed by an institutional power? How? He's the president. So if he's being prejudiced, he obviously is backed by an institutional power called the executive branch. How is that not racism to a T? By even your dumb, silly academic standard.
What that means is that you can have a person of color who is prejudiced against me because I'm white, and that sucks. I'm not saying that's okay. But it's not racism because in our country, I, because of the color of my skin, am backed and supported by more institutions than that person of color is. So let's take.
I don't think that's higher than the office of the president, but this white guilt is so dumb and crazy, man. I can't, just groveling nonsense. It's ridiculous.
An example, right? Let's take if I'm sitting in a parking lot right now, right? Let's say a person of color, like a black woman.
Oh my gosh. This is the craziest part, guys. This is the craziest part. Like, ears up. So you're sitting in a parking lot, okay?
Woman saw me, thought I was suspicious looking, and called the cops. Do we really think that anything bad is really going to happen to me, except that maybe it'll like take some time out of my day? But on the flip side, if I, a white woman, saw a black woman sitting in her car and I called the cops, there's a pretty good likelihood that something really bad is going to happen to that black woman. And that.
I told my sister about this, and she immediately said, "That's racist. That's racist. She's racist. She's racist." So we've established you're sitting in a parking lot, and please don't call the police on people unless you think they're in danger or trouble or there's really something suspicious going on. Don't just bother people, okay? So let's get out that the way. But whatever her definition of suspicious is, there's someone suspicious. There's a black woman looking at a white woman. Something suspicious is happening. She calls the cops, and she says nothing's probably going to happen to that woman. Okay, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But but if I'm a white woman and I call the cops on a black woman, then something bad is probably going to happen. She's probably going to have a bad day. She's probably going to be pulled into questioning. That is a lot of assuming right there. And I don't know how many times she's called the police in her life, but that is crazy. That is crazy. My sister called the police because she saw, like, in the neighborhood, there was some arguing going on, and there was a black woman arguing with her boyfriend, and it looked like he was like dragging her at the car, and she's like yelling, and he's like pulling her kind of toward the woods area. And she's like, I don't know if I'm about to witness a murder. So she calls the police, and the police go and they talk, and they're just having like a dispute or whatever. But they didn't end up doing anything because she didn't want to press charges. So if you just think that kind of that people, you call the police and what, they're going to get shot, they're always going to get called in, and they always want to just find some reason to throw people in jail. That is not reality. I don't know what world you live in, but it's not reality. People got to do paperwork and all this kind of stuff. Police do not just want to pull people in all the time. They just don't. They just don't. This is so far removed, and this is why I said this sort of training is ridiculous. Her view of the world is so skewed. You're saying you're sitting in a parking lot as a white woman and something suspicious is happening. Something suspicious is happening, and you see a woman of color. I don't know what the suspicious is. I don't know her definition of suspicious, but let's assume you think something bad is about to happen, but you're like, you know what, I can't call the police because something bad might happen. And well, what if she's about to commit a crime? What if she's in the process of committing a crime, but you won't call the police? But you won't call the police because something bad might happen, because you're like, there's a certain possibility, like like you're pretty certain this will happen. What's your data, your background on that? Where's your evidence for such a strong belief? You know, I talked about this last week. The data analyst for Reuters, he was with them for 6 years. And he noticed that the company was very pro BLM. And so he started writing, he had all this data on them. He just realized that their message wasn't true, that there was no data to support to support that the police were just targeting Black people like this. And then he also got some data from like a Black economist from Harvard, who's a brilliant tenured professor, who came to the same conclusion that he had, even though he thought he would get a different conclusion. And as a matter of fact, when he found out he got his results, he like fired his team and like tried again. But turns out BLM is full of lies, and this mindset that liberals have that the police are just always picking on Black folks like this is just not true. It's just not true. I'm not saying people aren't discriminated against in certain areas or anything like that, or I'm not trying to discredit everybody's anecdotal evidence, but this sort of worldview that she has, that she's like, well, I can't, as a white woman, cause the police, and there's a suspicious Black lady, something bad's gonna happen. It's you are not helping society. You are a danger. This is the problem with white allies. You are now a danger. You are now a danger. And you think you're just a sweet history professor or teacher trying to teach all the white kids about racism. And you won't call the police because on someone apparently suspicious. Okay. Okay. That's crazy. But anyway, Reuters was mad at them, and he posted his findings in this hub for everyone to see, like in the company or whatever. And so people start freaking out. People are going in on him. He went to HR. HR got mad at him. They're like, you got to like get rid of this and stuff. And they ended up firing him. So he released his stuff, and we went through it. And you know what? It wasn't anything I hadn't heard before. And you know what? There's a lot of Black people who are terrorized by other Black people in their communities. So if you're just sitting there like, and telling your over 300,000 followers, well, if you see a Black woman, if you call the police, something will happen. And this is why Joe Biden has to nominate a Black woman to the Supreme Court. Guys. And I took over 80 hours of diversity, equity, and inclusion training that's not grounded in reality, sweetheart. Not in the least bit. Not in the least, man. Let's see if there's anything else.
She might be called in for questioning. She might go to jail, right? That's institutional power. So until Biden says, I'm introducing a constitutional amendment that says that from here on out, only Black women can be on the Supreme Court, like, we don't have a problem. White people, we're fine. We're totally fine.
So unless Joe Biden introduces a constitutional amendment that says I can be openly racist, it's not a problem if you're racist. Okay. That's ridiculous. And she said, and back to the if you call the police on the Black woman, she could go in for questioning, she could be arrested. Did she do it or not? Like, because we established that the call is because of something suspicious, right? Or maybe she's assuming that white people are just calling police on Black people just for funsies or whatever. But I assume that we're going with a scenario that you call because something suspicious is happening. So if something suspicious is happening and the police arrest them because they have cause or whatever, that's actually them doing their jobs. And you may consider that a bad thing. Like, how deep is this scenario going? Like, or is it just like we're looking at the amount of black people in jail and we're like, oh, it's bad. Well, like, did they do it or not? If they didn't do it, like, we need criminal justice reform and get them good lawyers and all the other stuff. But if they did it, that's a different issue. And this soft on crime, like, justice reform kind of stuff is the reason why we have a lot of crime going on right now, because people are trying to self-correct with this equity inclusion kind of ideology, and it's just causing more harm to a lot of black people in their communities. And that was another thing a data scientist who was fired from Reuters also analyzed, that we have more access crime and murders than we should normally be having right now because of the effects of BLM. But people like jumped onto it, marched with them, and all this stuff, and now people don't even know where all the money is. They're being investigated for that. But I have shown this many times just to drive this point home, that the more left you are, the more wrong you are about police shooting statistics. And so in this, you can see how many unarmed black men were killed by police in 2019. About 10, about 100, about 1,000, about 10,000, more than 10,000. And you can see the more liberal you are, the more wrong you are about this topic. The highest number in the very liberal, there's people who think the number is over 1,000. And the number is 13. At least the last I looked at it was 13. It sure ain't 100, and it sure ain't 1,000, it sure ain't 10,000. There's people who believe that there's more, almost 8% of very liberal people believe that more than 10,000 unarmed black people have been killed by police in 2019, in 1 year. And if you were that hysterical and you actually believe the police were killing more than 10,000 or 10,000 or even 1,000 black people a year, I can understand you being so hypersensitive about all this sort of thing. And just because you are unarmed doesn't necessarily mean that you're not a danger at all either. You just kind of have to look at this stuff on a case-by-case basis. But this sort of worldview, like, what if you call an institutional power example would be that if you call the police a black woman on a suspicious black woman, she might get arrested. And she's also assuming that if a suspicious white person will be let go and a suspicious black person might be arrested. This was just like a wild sort of example, just going from, yeah, Joe Biden should totally elect appoint a black woman specifically, and it's reverse racism isn't real and all this other kind of stuff. So I just find all this stuff frustrating. And again, I'm well aware that there's people out there. There's a movie called The Kid with Bruce Willis, and he's an image consultant. And there was someone at the very beginning of the film who did something like criminal corrupt or something. So they called him. He's like, get a black kid, get 2 Asian kids, did a Hispanic kid or whatever. And then they, like, I don't know, threw pie on him or something like that as like some kind of apology video. I can't remember the specifics of it, but there are people who do think in terms of race like that all the time. I'm not going to deny that is a factor in a lot of people's like staging, whether it's like politically or entertainment stuff like that. But in the case, do you really think we're moving in a more progressive type of society when we are openly discriminating against other people to try to achieve some kind of end or correct some kind of wrong? The positive way forward in things and the true goal of what the civil rights and stuff should have been. But actually, if you adhere to like critical race theory, they don't believe in just creating a colorblind society. They believe that the world has basically kind of been kind of corrupt, and we need to sort of have this equity sort of way of thinking. It should be cool that this person is a qualified person. You know, it doesn't matter if they are black and white, but it's cool that she's a black woman. We can celebrate that because the country has come so far. That would be the correct way to look at it. But someone, Joe Biden, and announcing it, man, making it known that he is pandering, and he knows he's pandering, and he's going to get away with that, I suppose. And that's, he's disgusting on so many different levels. Just particularly him, not just particularly him, but particularly Biden. But our society should move to a point where people of all colors, shapes, and sizes and stuff are just succeeding because they're qualified and they're great. And we can still celebrate and see people's differences and just be so happy that our country has progressed in such a way. And we can go back and remember a time when people would have made this impossible because of their race and their gender. But we are making it impossible for certain people because of their race and their gender. If you are a man, and if you are Hispanic, and if you are Asian, and if you are white. So I told you guys that was crazy. I know it's pretty revved up. I was pretty revved up and ready to talk about that. So I'm glad I could talk to you guys about that. Reverse racism is real in the sense that it's just regular, good old fashioned racism.